You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor, Corey, Dr. O,
Brandon Sanders,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have Samantha Verant on the show with me. She has an amazingly fun book that's a brand new release. When you're hearing this, it came out yesterday, and it's called Sophie Valroux's Paris Stars. What a fun romp of a read. I know you guys are going to love it, especially going into the holiday season. This gives you all of the great feels that we want to have this time of year. Welcome to the show, Samantha.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's really important for me to be back virtually in the U.S. So I'm so psyched to be here.
Absolutely. Samantha, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Gosh, that's a good question. I have a really strange background. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be an actress and a gymnast too. Nadia Comaneci, hello. And with writing, I was always an avid and very voracious reader. My parents had me read classics from the age of 6 to 10 to 12. I was always at the library. I never thought of writing as an option. But something happened, something in my mind clicked, and I started writing middle grade actually at first, and went on to young adult, and then it turned into a memoir because I had something really strange happen in my life. And now I'm writing women's fiction, and I love it. So, long story short, I can sing on the page, act out scenes, and do everything I love doing except for gymnastics, which I'm really bad at.
Well, have you tried writing a gymnastic scene yet?
Oh gosh, no.
Then you don't know that you're bad at it yet. Then
a mailbox. I was pretending to be Nadia Comaneci, and I dove off a mailbox.
Oh my goodness!
Trying to do a flip when I was 10. But back to writing, yeah.
So, Samantha, you mentioned that you had written and published a couple of memoirs. What was it that, as someone who began writing middle grade fiction, young adult, then to turn the lens back on yourself, as it were, and tell your own story? What was the motivation to begin, telling your own story in memoir form?
Well, the motivation for my memoirs was I thought maybe women would connect to my story, even men too, like you. So my story was kind of weird with the memoir. I reconnected with a French man. I live in France. That I had met when I was 19 years old. He wrote me 7 love letters. I never wrote him back until 20 years later.
Wow.
And and we're happily married now, for going on for 12 years.
That's wild. So then just from that experience, you just uh, decided to tell the story of how the two of you got
Back
together and then got back together.
there, and I have two wonderful stepchildren. They are my children, and just sharing the love, I guess. Yeah.
So
So
the first one was that How to Make a French Family.
no, the first one, 7 Letters from Paris. It's when I recount the story where Jean-Luc, my husband now, he had written me 7 letters that I didn't respond to until 20 years later.
Wow, what what an incredible
Married to him.
turn of events.
We're going on 12 years, and it's great, and it feels like yesterday.
That is amazing. Um, when you started collecting your story, to put in the memoir, was that a scary thing? As someone who had told stories before, um, about make believe characters, then when you are the character, that comes with the stakes are completely different for that, aren't they?
Yeah, the stakes are different because sometimes people, if they read the memoir, and if they don't like the main character, who is me, yeah, that's kind of awkward. And, I didn't set out to do it, but I really do like writing and sharing worlds and, getting deep down and I guess sometimes dirty with the characters.
I'm always fascinated when we talk about memoirs that you when you read a memoir, you're not reading an autobiography from cradle to grave, as it were. You're looking into this life through a window, and that window is defined by a particular period of time or a set of circumstances. Um, how did you define that window that you gave us into your life?
I just did it from the heart, but one thing I think everybody needs to know, even writers, if there are writers out there writing a memoir, you have to remember you're going to be edited by your editor. And, it's an interesting process. And, I love the books, and I took the turn, from starting out. When I started out, I was writing middle grade, young adult. Then my story happened to me, and now I'm writing things I know. So with Sophie Valroux's Paris Star, which is the second book, carrying on Sophie's stories, it can be read as a standalone. But a lot of the character of Sophie, like just being vulnerable and driven, comes from within me, I guess, if that makes sense.
Sure. You are a chef as well, aren't you?
An at-home chef.
Yeah. What was it that first kind of lit the spark to make you fall in love with not just food but food preparation and cooking and kind of the art form of cooking?
Well, I've been cooking since I've been 9 years old. I guess I have what is called a creative soul. So any form of creativity, cooking, writing, art. My former background, I'm a graphic designer too. So anything where you can express yourself through things. And I think with cooking, you're also expressing your heart, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. Well, that was going to be the next thing that I asked you. I love to hear how people find the intersections between creative pursuits, and sometimes it's someone that works in theater and then becomes a writer, or a graphic designer like you are, and a writer, and they're different forms of storytelling, but in the end they're all storytelling. I've not talked to that many chefs who are also writers. Do you see any sort of intersection between cooking and storytelling?
Well, definitely. I mean, with cooking and food and books, we all eat, and we can all say that food and meals bring family together. So every story we might have, even just growing up, is maybe over a meal. It could be a Thanksgiving, it could be here or there. It's just something that hits in your heart. I just recall my grandmother cooking for me when I was a kid, and I'll never forget her recipes and what she taught me, and also, that feeling of love over a meal.
So the new book, Sophie Valroux's Paris Stars, is a continuation of sorts of the secret French recipes of Sophie Valroux. Do these books? I mean, obviously they're connected through the main character, but is this an ongoing series? Are they standalones that just happen to have the same character? How do they connect?
It's a continuation of Sophie's story from the first book, but it can definitely be read as a standalone because I give enough backstory to why and how Sophie inherited this fabulous French chateau that maybe I want. But it's her journey, and it's a different story. In this book, I have her lose her senses of taste and smell. The worst possible thing to happen to a chef.
Wow. That kind of instantly sets up conflict that is going to be fun to see where that goes.
Yeah, and also about dreams. Her dream was always to be Michelin starred. And that was one of the biggest inspirations for the books, because when I first wrote the first book, The Secret French Recipes of Sophie Valroux, the inspiration came from me finding out only 1% of female chefs were Michelin starred.
Wow. So where did the character of Sophie come from? Is she kind of an amalgamation of several women? Is she kind of you in disguise? Where did she come from?
And that's a funny question, because somebody pointed out to me my name's Samantha Verant and her name's Sophie Valroux. So we have the same initials. So I'm fairly certain, totally certain her character comes from me. And somebody that can be vulnerable and headstrong and fight and make mistakes. She makes a lot of them. And yeah, So yeah, she totally comes from my heart.
Love it. Dabble is a proud sponsor of Author Stories. Dabble is an easy-to-use cloud-based writing tool that gives writers a way to organize, plot, and create amazing stories wherever they are. Write in our desktop app on your Mac or Windows computer, tablet, or mobile device. Dabble syncs your latest version with the cloud on all your devices. Write anywhere and anytime inspiration strikes. We got you. Dabble is my preferred writing tool, and I think it will be yours as well. Visit dabblewriter.com for your free trial. You have an amazing story idea. You execute the writing and editing flawlessly, and now the only thing missing are readers. We can help you go from author to author superhero with Story Origin. Story Origin is a one-stop shop for marketing tools with a community of amazing authors working together to find reviewers, build mailing lists, increase sales, and collect feedback from beta readers. Everything an author needs, all in one place, from providing review copies or beta copies, reader magnets to ensure you stay connected with readers, easily distribute audio promo codes, universal retail links to send readers directly to the proper point of purchase, or provide direct download links for members of your mailing list. Story Origin has all the tools you need in one easy-to-use site. Use the promo code ASP21 at checkout when subscribing to the yearly plan, and you will get 10% off your first year. This code will expire December 31st, so hurry over and subscribe now. StoryOriginApp.com. So after the first book, The Secret French Recipes of Sophie Valroux, how did you start thinking about, what's going to be the next adventure that you set up for Sophie? When you're first starting the process for a new book, do you start going through ideas of things that you could do to Sophie? Is there like a news article or something that you've read or watched that triggers a plot point? What's that first moment of inspiration like?
Well, when I started writing the book, I had actually planned a trilogy, but it's just going to be a duology, so 2 books. And the title changed. It was called Flambé at first, like flambé. And then the next one was brûlé. And then the next one would be sucré, which is sweet. And like planning it out, yeah, I do put in a ton of book research. And for the second book, there was an article somewhere, and I forget where, it was a male Michelin starred chef who said that women couldn't carry their own pots and pans. And
what?
Yeah. So, but I wanted Sophie to be a fighter and fight through her. She's stubborn, maybe like me. I don't know. I'm not stubborn. Don't ask my husband. I wanted to have her just fight for her dreams, and then, like, spoiler alert, no, I can't do it. Maybe find out, she's happy with everything that she has, which is, I have such a wacky cast of characters, and they were the most fun to write.
I was going to ask you about that because there really are a lively cast of characters that fill the book. How do you go about casting, and I'm making air quotes, casting the characters in your story?
I think it would be people I would want to know. in my life and people that I've met, nobody is based off of anybody, really. I don't know Gustav, who is the drunk pastry chef that gets into a bicycle accident with a sheep. How do I come up with that? I don't know. I think it's, living in southwestern France where I live, I've met so many wild people and characters, and maybe there's a little bit of everybody in the characters that I created.
I love it. The book very much reads like a travel log of sorts, and especially for someone sitting in the U.S. and reading this, I feel like I'm transported to France with you. How important is setting to you, and to really kind of painting that tapestry of where the book takes place, and taking someone in my position and traveling across the Atlantic and making me feel like I've been on an adventure?
That is actually very important to me because I live in Toulouse. I'm not in Provence. My husband is from Provence. So everybody reads about Paris and, Provence or the Côte d'Azur. My area here is so fantastic. And I wanted, actually, when I was writing, to have people experience the same things I did when I moved here. And I can't say it was great in the beginning because I had a language barrier. But the more I got to know the people, it's so kind and loving. It's not like, I don't know, it's southwestern France, and I really wanted to bring people into here, this world of mine.
And you definitely did that. I felt like I was there. So when you're trying to make that sort of experience for readers, what are some of the things that you hit on to make it feel like that we're immersed in the story and in the setting and the place, without it just being just details for detail's sake? And is that something that when you're going through the editing process that you say, well, maybe I need more detail here, or maybe you say I need to cut back some of this because I think they get the point without me just beating them over the head with it?
Good question. Let me ponder for a second. I think the most important thing is, especially in both of the books, is food. And bringing people into the taste and giving them a sensorial experience through taste. Here, we have seasonal eating, and figs were just in season, and seps, mushrooms, are in season now. And I think through taste and the way I write about food, I bring people into the world, if that makes sense. I hope it does.
Well, and that's a very good point that you bring up, because one of the main plot points of this book is that Sophie loses her sense of taste and smell, and number one, for a chef, that's going to be detrimental, but then for a writer who's building this sense of taste in the in the words that you're sharing with us, that it just seems to me like you're building more and more challenges for yourself in how you're going to tell this story.
Yeah. Definitely. And I'm an evil author for even to my character. Sorry, Sophie. It's a balance, and going back to your question, like bringing people to France as well. I want people to know that there's more to France than Paris. It's an incredible place.
Absolutely. The people and the relationships between the characters in your books are so heartwarming and so engaging. How important, and you mentioned earlier that the people that you met when you first moved there were so great and so welcoming and so loving. How important is that to convey those aspects in the story that you're telling?
No, I think it's really important. I'm a lucky girl. My neighbors, like to the left of me, they are like my French parents. Always welcomed me from the get-go, even when I stumble with my words, which I do sometimes. I mean, go figure, a writer, but if you imagine speaking in French. No, it's important for me to convey the spirit of the French life, actually. And maybe it's different for other people. Maybe I'm just lucky. I don't know.
Love
Maybe
it.
I am really lucky.
You said that originally you had envisioned this as a trilogy, and now it's going to be a 2-book series. What are you focusing on next?
Oh, good question. So I can finally announce this news. I have a new book that will be coming out in 2023. It's called The Spice Master at Bistro Exotique. And it's about an American chef opening up a restaurant in Paris who goes through a lot of just things just keep hitting her. And she meets this woman who is the self-proclaimed Spice Master of Paris.
Oh, that's going to be fantastic.
And it's fun, and I put more of my own humor into the next book, and yeah.
Well, as an American now living in the southwest of France, that I would think would have a keen ability to tell the story of an American in, kind of taking on this new world.
Yeah, 11 years later, it feels like yesterday, though.
Love it.
Oh, and also, I'm French now, too.
Oh, nice. So you have dual citizenship now?
Citizenship.
That's fantastic. Well, Sophie Valroux's Paris Stars is available everywhere now. When you're hearing this, we're going to have links to it in the show notes of this episode where you can grab it in paperback or Kindle edition or audiobook. Samantha, have you listened to the audiobook of it yet?
Not yet, but I did listen to the first one, and I can tell you Imani, Jade Powers, who narrates the book, is awesome. Her voice is so sultry and soft, and every time I listened to her for the first book, I was like, oh my God, it wasn't even like I wrote the book.
That's the best part in it, when you're transported by your own book.
Yeah. frankly, authors, we don't like to read or
or listen to your own work
after a million times.
Right.
But wow, Imani Jade Powers, what a narrator. Amazing.
Excellent. We'll put links to the audiobook in the show notes as well. Samantha, this has been so much fun chatting. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Well, and thank you for having me, even though I was almost an hour early.
Now stay tuned for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
The brutes of the Andersonville Prison Hospital have moved me to the dead room, or so it has come to be known. None so domiciled have yet left this place. We receive only the smallest rations and only cursory care, to reduce our odors and spare the nostrils of our keepers. The good Christians of the Confederacy do not see any need to provide comfort to those who will soon sleep soundly enough underground. You must know, at least, how your father came to such an end. At Doctortown, Kilpatrick entrusted me with the conquest of a railroad trestle, and my bummers, my demolition team, acquitted themselves admirably thanks to my ingenuity with powder. We successfully destroyed the trestle work past Morgan's Lake. This would prove to be my entire contribution to the war. Federal troops were unable to capture the bridge or overcome the enemy's battery. Kilpatrick withdrew, and my bummers and I found ourselves on the wrong side of the Altamaha River, behind the enemy line with no hope of reaching our encampment. Rebels accosted us, taking our remaining supplies. We escaped and headed south, hoping by a long march to reach Seymour's forces in Jacksonville, but we encountered other rebel encampments at Jessup. 4 of my men were lost to gunfire. We marched west, then south again, barely evading capture. We had no choice but to brave the great swamp Okefenokee. Oh, on and on it goes, in every direction, endlessly. We trudged through miles of grasping mud and noxious rot, pursued by hunger and the mosquito, scratching at our arms and faces until all our skin was scourged. We lived off alligator meat at first, then nothing at all. My men grew mutinous, blamed me for all their misfortunes, threatened to throw me in a sack, weigh me down with stones, and sink my body. Yet was I not equally hungry? Did I not starve? I grew weary of their endless insubordination and contempt. Finally, they took hold of me and swore they would hang me by the neck for leading them to ruin. They were 5 in number, younger than I and more muscular. I was no match for them physically. They laid their hands on me, and I burned them. I burned those men. The flame rose from me as from a volcano, stripping the skin from those boys, blackening their faces, roasting their flesh. And let this be my final ghastly confession. I feasted that night, feasted on the meat of my prospective murderers. And that is how I survived. I staggered alone from that swamp, a mad thing, fueled by outrage and guilt. I saw an encampment of rebel soldiers and surrendered myself gladly. They say in Andersonville prison all men are brothers, equal in filth, equal in terror, equal in ruin. Yet I feel I may claim some small distinction, at least. For I am surely damned to a greater extent than any here.